1971, a family of 7 moved into a quiet farmhouse in Harrisville, Rhode Island, hoping for a new beginning. Instead, they stepped into the heart of one of the most terrifying hauntings in American history. What followed would leave them forever scarred and inspire one of the most chilling horror films of our time. But what really happened inside that house? This is the true story the movies only hinted at. Turn down the lights, take a deep breath, and prepare to hear the haunting tale of the Perron family exactly as it unfolded. Because once you step into the dark, it watches back. Before we open the door to Harrisville, take a moment to subscribe and keep the bell close. Here, every story is a shadow, and every shadow waits for someone to follow it. Make sure you're with us when the next one calls your name. From the very first day, something was wrong. It wasn't just the creaky floors or the cold air. The atmosphere itself was heavy with a feeling of dread. Carolyn Perron felt it first. A mother's intuition that told her something was terribly wrong with their new home. The girls began hearing whispers in the walls, and Christine swore someone was standing at the foot of her bed. Soon the small signs of a presence escalated. Objects went missing, furniture was found slightly moved, and they heard the unmistakable sound of someone walking down the stairs when no one was home. The girls began to talk about a woman, a figure in a torn gray dress with black eyes. The youngest, Osipperler, called her Bathsheba, a name she said came to her in a dream. The more they tried to ignore it, the more it fed on their fear. The manifestations grew more personal and more malicious. Carolyn started waking up with bruises, tiny ones like fingerprints pressed into her skin. One night she felt a cold hand on her leg, and when she opened her eyes, she saw a face sunken with rot standing in the corner. That was the first time she screamed, her terrified cries finally breaking the unspoken rule of silence. Desperate for answers, they called a local historian, who revealed the property's violent and bloody past. Multiple deaths had occurred on the land, including hangings, drownings, and even a suspected murder-suicide. Most chillingly, he spoke of a woman from the 1800s named Bathsheba Sherman. Rumored to be a witch, she was accused of sacrificing her infant child to the devil. Though never convicted, the townspeople believed she had cursed the land and anyone who dared to live on it. Suddenly, everything made sense. Bathsheba was not just a ghost. She was a malevolent force anchored in rage and darkness. Night after night, the attacks escalated. The children were scratched and bitten in their sleep, waking up with unexplained marks. But the worst was Carolyn, whom Bathsheba hated most of all. Carolyn began to change. Her voice, her face, her very essence seemed to be slowly corrupted. Her moments of lucidity were scattered, and one afternoon, Andrea found her mother holding a knife, her eyes vacant as she whispered, "It won't hurt if you don't fight." That's when they called paranormal investigators, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Before the Warrens even set foot on the property, the air in the farmhouse seemed to shift, as though it knew help was on the way and resented it. The nights leading up to their arrival were the worst the family had endured. Doors slammed with such force the frames splintered. Shadows moved in the corners without any light to cast them, and the smell of sulfur clung to the walls like an oily film. Carolyn's condition deteriorated faster, her skin pale and clammy, her eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights spent pacing the halls. The children began refusing to sleep in their own rooms, gathering together in one bed like frightened birds in a storm. Roger stopped going to work, too afraid to leave them alone, as if the house was simply waiting for its chance to claim them all. Later, the Warrens arrived. The Warrens arrived to find a house that was no longer a home, but a spiritual battlefield. Lorraine, a clairvoyant with a deep sensitivity to spiritual energy, immediately felt the oppressive energy upon stepping through the threshold. She confirmed their deepest fears. "It's Bathsheba. She's still here." Over the next few days, the Warrens meticulously documented everything, from the inexplicable cold spots and the distinct smell of rotting flesh to the chilling growls coming from inside the walls. But it was Carolyn who bore the full brunt of Bathsheba's wrath. Lorraine observed her closely, witnessing her sudden fits of rage and confusion. One night, Lorraine watched in horror as Carolyn's body lifted slowly off the bed, a voice hissing from her unmoving lips, "She is mine." Ed and Lorraine realized they were not dealing with a simple haunting, but a powerful demonic infestation. They attempted a chance to confront the entity, a last-ditch effort to save Carolyn and the family, but it backfired horribly. As Lorraine prayed, Carolyn began to convulse violently, her body arching unnaturally. An unseen force threw her across the room, where she hit the wall with a sickening crack. leaving her unconscious with blood trickling from her nose. The Warrens, rattled by the experience, knew they had underestimated the entity's strength. They left the house as they could not get a sanctioned exorcism from the church, and the family was left to endure a renewed wave of terror. The spirits seemed invigorated, as if the failed seance had only provoked them. New horrors unfolded. The youngest daughter, April, began talking to a spirit named Rory, a boy who had drowned in a nearby creek decades ago. The animals on the property were also attacked. Their dog was found dead and crows swarmed the house, breaking through windows and dying without ever touching the ground. Here, the final act. By summer, the house's hatred was no longer hidden. It was a living, breathing thing, feeding on the fear and suffering of its captives. Carolyn had fallen completely under its spell. Her bruises worse, her behavior more erratic. She began speaking in other voices, and Roger once found her pressing her hand into the burning fireplace embers, smiling as she whispered, "He needs the fire." They tried to leave twice, but each attempt was met with supernatural resistance. The car refused to start, the tires were shredded, and the girls fell violently ill as soon as they stepped past the edge of the property. They were prisoners in their own home, bound to the cursed land. One night, a fierce storm rolled in and the power went out. The house began to scream. Not a human scream, but a deep, guttural roar that came from the walls and floors, as though the very structure were in agony. Dishes exploded in the cabinets, mirrors cracked, and crosses flipped upside down on their own. Then they saw her. Bathsheba stood at the top of the stairs, impossibly tall, her face twisted in a cruel grin. Her eyes were black holes that seemed to suck the light out of the room, and from her mouth came a chilling whisper, "She belongs to me." Carolyn's body lifted off the bed, her limbs stiffening as a black, tar-like substance poured from her mouth. Roger was thrown across the room by an invisible force. Just as Bathsheba reached for Carolyn, Lorraine Warren returned, feeling an urgent, spiritual pull to the house. She raised a blessed medallion and began to pray, her voice shaking but steady. The air around Bathsheba crackled with malevolent energy, but Lorraine's prayers held firm. Bathsheba shrieked, twisted, and then vanished. The house fell silent, but Lorraine warned them that she was still there, bound to the land. They had only bought them time. The Perrons stayed for several more years, enduring the echoes of terror that would never fully die. They eventually left the farmhouse, but the scars remained, and their trauma was not entertainment. It was real, and it lived in the walls of a house that still stands to this day, a silent monument to one of America's most terrifying true stories. The weeks after the failed seance became a waking nightmare. Daylight offered no safety. Strange shapes would drift across the walls even in the full glow of morning, and faint whispers would echo through the kitchen as Carolyn cooked, as though mocking the idea of normal life. At night, the temperature in the house plummeted until frost formed on the inside of the windows, each breath hanging in the air like smoke. Andrea began waking with bloody scratches down her back, but she swore she had felt nothing while sleeping, as if something wanted her to doubt her own senses. The youngest girls spoke less and less, retreating into silence, their eyes darting toward the corners of rooms where no one stood. Even the floors seemed to groan more heavily under their footsteps, as if the house was bearing witness to every heartbeat. One evening, Roger caught sight of a figure in the barn, an old woman in a rotted dress, holding what looked like a bundle wrapped in stained cloth. When he stepped closer, the bundle moved. The figure turned slowly, revealing a face half eaten away, and then she was gone. That night, the pounding in the walls began, starting softly like a heartbeat and growing into a violent thudding that shook the entire frame of the house. The Perrons knew then that Bathsheba was no longer content to haunt them. She was preparing to claim one of them for good. If you think this is just another ghost story, think again. The Perron family still speaks of what happened in hushed voices, and the farmhouse remains waiting for its next tenant. Maybe you believe in the paranormal. Maybe you don't. But if you ever find yourself in Harrisville, Rhode Island, and you see the light in that upstairs window flicker twice, keep walking, because some doors once opened can never be closed again.